I'm here today with Andrew Martin. He's a highly attuned energy intuitive and personal transformation guide. You can find out more about his work at andrewmartin.energy or visit his YouTube channel under the same name. People who have been listening to my show for a while know that I have Andrew on, I don't know, whenever the mood hits us, I think, whenever we got stuff to talk about. So I'm really excited to have you on again. How are you doing?
Super happy to be here. I am thrilled. I was just sharing with you before we started that I've just gotten a new laptop, and my connection issues, which I was attributing to my internet connection out here, were like the bane of my existence for the past year and a half. Turns out it was my laptop. It was literally a death rattle that came out of my laptop last week, and I was like, computers are not supposed to make that sound. And so scrambled getting all my financial resources together to get this new laptop. And besides the fact that I don't think I will ever stop loving new technological toys. Like, say what you will about that, but I just like new. I mean, it's shiny and bright and it's really fast. But just the fact that I can do live streaming again, which for me is the sweet spot. I love just being able to sit myself down and go for it. And I did it this morning. The Oracle card reading for the week was the first time I'd live streamed in I don't know how long. And oh my God, it felt so good. It felt so good. And now that I can have conversations with you and they won't get interrupted, and like my client sessions aren't interrupted, like it's amazing to me how much the quality of so much of my experience is tied to the level of technology that I have available.
Yes.
It's crazy.
It is crazy. And before we started our recording today, we were talking about learning new software and how much it lights us up. Like I have a friend right now who asked me, I offered to build her website for her. And I just love that. I love figuring stuff out. But there's something, you were speaking to the fact that, that just how things fit together so well. And what I love about what little I know about coding or programming, or even just, trying to navigate new software, is that what it means is what it means. So if you put in a piece of code and it does exactly what you expect it to do, like there's always this certain part of me that's like, ooh, like, yay, it did that. And then you're like, of course it does that. That's the beauty of like an unperturbed piece of code. And then, I think about code, like there's no story there, there's no overlays, there's no nothing. It's like, I want to put a space here, or I want this to be this color. Well, there is specific demands to make that happen. And there's no gray areas. There's no like if you put it in correctly, it'll work. And there's something so beautiful about that. Like I said, an undisturbed piece of code that just functions as it's supposed to.
It's a thing of beauty. It's a thing of beauty. And I think, as you were sharing, sort of came to mind that perhaps part of it, because I'm the same way, like I built to a degree. I mean, I'm not a coder, but I can do as much as I can do. And I love to do what I can do and learn new things. So I've had a hand in building all of my websites, either by myself or in, conjunction with someone who knows what they're doing on the back end more than I do. But it's so satisfying. You're right. There is something so fulfilling to like, when I put these numbers here and this information here, this is what I get every single time. And if I don't get that, then I know that there was an error in something that I put in there. So it's so clear and black and white. And maybe it's because I can speak for myself. Maybe it's because so much of what I do is so ephemeral. And so much of what I do is so often ambiguous and open to interpretation. And yes, there are sort of black and white things of working with this energy and working in the universe. And, I think of our intentions are sort of like our coding, right? That we're imprinting into the universe, and the clearer our intentions are, the clearer the outcome. But there's just something really satisfying about something that doesn't need interpretation, that does not have a gray area, that does not require me to intuit anything other than you put the space where you should have put the period or whatever. Like, I'm with you. It's so fulfilling and so satisfying.
And I love making that connection between, literal code that runs our computers and those algorithms and rules that we create. And, that is fascinating. But I love it when we think about code, like you were speaking in terms of intention. Like, what do we expect if we only put out that code 5% of the time? And we think, oh yeah, this is what I want in my life. This is it. I'm going to set the intention. I throw the intention out there. But then, for the rest of the time, we're not putting that same code out there. In fact, it's either disturbed, or it could even be like a code that's written in complete opposition of what you're trying to put out there. So I love, the analogy only goes so far when we think about us as at a nexus point with technology or something. It only goes so far, but it's still a pretty fascinating way to look at things.
It is. And if you think about it, it's the insecurity or the doubt or the second guessing of the intention that makes it fall apart. And what do we do with code? Because we trust it, because we've been taught that it is infallible. When you do it right, it always works. We have no programming that tells us to question it or second guess it. It's the same thing with our intentions. Had we been taught from, age 5, that when you have a clear intention, you get what you're intending, I don't think we would have the level of doubt, because it's the same thing. And what is it about coding that allows me to punch it in and go, okay, it works, and then move on and never look at it again, never second guess it, never doubt it, never question it? That's why it works.
Very good.
But it's when I put out an intention, the universe goes, oh, wait, is that what I really want? Oh, but she has one bigger. Maybe I want her version. Oh, can I have that? Am I capable of having that? Does the universe really, So the minute I put it out there, I start just, picking it apart with all of my doubts and insecurities. I don't do that with code.
Yeah, because it just works.
Yeah.
Yes, I love that. I've never really quite put those things together or seen it that way.
I can force an analogy.
Good.
I'll find a way to make it work.
Well, as you
How
know,
have you been? I mean, you're back in the US. Like,
Yeah.
What's going on with you? How have you been?
Well, as you know, just to continue on with learning new software, I found this software called Omni Geometry, and I've been playing with creating sacred geometry. And this, again, right? I think that you and I share this fundamental love of learning. Like, it really does light me up. Like, I like the challenge. I like the mental stimulation. There's so many cool things. And then especially stuff like there's a whole aspect of creativity that is connected. So I've been working with the sacred geometry, and man, it has been interacting with my field. Of course, how could it not, right?
Yeah.
So because you're staring, and the cool thing is like, it's not like there's this drag and drop, like, oh, here's Metatron's cube, and you can just like throw it into it's, no, Metatron's cube is 11 layers that I have to figure out how to create it. It's so, it gets me so excited. And then you get to watch this cool sacred geometry. And now I'm going out, and this is kind of where I wanted to take this, is seeing the flowers. Now I'm seeing it everywhere. Of course, those patterns were always there, but then now I'm like, oh, wow, I can see now, because I'm doing it with my left brain and creating it. But then there's also this piece of like just pure creativity, and just being in relationship with the environment now in that way, and seeing the flowers and seeing, oh, wow, that's a beautiful, that star shape or whatever, that spiral. It's just fascinating.
It really is. And I think we even talked about this in one of our episodes, one of the earlier episodes, about, this period where I was doing my meditations were essentially drawing sacred geometry shapes. And I had gotten some graph paper, and I had a compass and a ruler and some, drafting tools. And I was just drawing like meditations of sacred geometry. And it's very similar to, I think, the interface with coding, in that it requires your focus, it requires precision, and especially doing it by hand, like a 32nd of an inch off in any of those angles. And you might not think that a 32nd of an inch is anything, but it progressively grows as you reach these other parts of the angle. And then what started off as like, it's insignificant, I can't even see it. Then by the time you reach the end, or what's supposed to conclude this whole shape, it's completely off and completely out of balance. And it does change. I mean, I'm not saying this hyperbolically, but it does kind of change everything in terms of how, or at least I interfaced with my reality, to see now you do start seeing those shapes everywhere, and you see those structures everywhere. For me, it's the torus. I'm working a lot with the torus right now in the torus fields, and that's coming through a lot of work. And so I'm seeing that cycle and that shape in everything too.
Yes.
Fascinating experience when you tap into those fundamental building blocks of reality, how that's all you see.
Yes, absolutely. And this is kind of extended my idea about being in relationship with things. And this actually has got me, I've gone down a whole rabbit hole with this lately. So I have these birds that just, I love. We have these feeders, and we just get so many different birds there all the time. And I started thinking about, and I've had bird feeders in the past, but now again, I guess everything's being stripped down to its essence. I'm thinking about being with these, in relationship with these birds. Like, how much do they now, rely on the food that I provide? And then I got a bird bath and now I'm all excited. And then I realized that the bees, you have to have certain things in the bird bath. So the bees, because they have to be able so I have a rock in the center so the bees can also, and I've been thinking about, our symbiotic relationship that we've created now, and how much, we're in relationship with things all the time and we don't realize what we're doing. And, I think about this too with the virus, and having this like singular focus on one single virus, when we've been in relationship with viruses for, they're part of our evolutionary process. Like, they're absolutely integral to our evolution. And so I think that we're losing that message a lot, to remember that whether we are aware of it or not, we're in conscious relationship with our environment all the time. And so how do it's not just me and I live in a house and then I have a bird feeder and the birds hang out. It's like, no, that's their space and this is my space as well. And how do I, nurture those conscious relationships more often? So like I said, I've been going down a rabbit hole, and I seriously, I attribute it to working with these shapes. Cause like I said, it strips everything down to like the fundamentals. And I see now how things are fitting together. Anyway, sorry, yeah. I went on.
No, because it does bring in, for me, what it really began to illustrate was, for me, the sacred geometry meditations pulled things out of the abstract. It pulled things, it changed it from an inspirational quote on the wall to bringing it into my body, to bringing it into my field, to bringing it into my awareness, where it wasn't something necessarily that I was consuming in terms of new information, because that happens, right? When we're learning and it's new information and it's opening up parts of our brain or whatever, and we love that. But I think that with sacred geometry, it was reminding me of what was already here. It was a remembrance thing. It wasn't new information. It was uncovering ancient information. And it was uncovering information that is indelible. Like, I don't care what version of reality you're in, at least in our concrete reality and even our, transphysical reality, those shapes are meaningful. And even in sound and in things that aren't necessarily touch it, engage with it through the feeling senses, they're still present there. So it does connect, it connected me to reality in a way where it was like, oh, this isn't abstract anymore. Like, suddenly I could feel myself in it, and I could feel what these shapes could do, and it moved from just the structure and the aesthetic of the geometry to the vibration that it creates, and how that also then informed my work and then also informed what I'm doing now. So that relationship and that piece of it is fascinating to me, because, and it's funny, I was just talking about this in the Oracle card reading for the week about the superposition and the law of observation, and how just by looking at something, you change it. And so everything is in relationship to everything else. And I've also shared this, that, I believe, and my perspective shows me that every particle is the center of the universe. So you are the center of the universe, called Angela. So that even brings a new shape to it, because then that changes the idea of geometry. It's no longer something I'm looking at. It's something that's emanating from me, like from the center point of my existence. And there is a center point. I can find those. It really does take it to a new level, and it takes you so far down the rabbit hole. And I love the way these days that I gauge whether or not I'm moving in a direction of discovery or remembrance is, do I have words for it? If I don't have language for it, that's where I'm going. I want to go to the places that I cannot describe. I want to go to the places that I have no words for those experiences, because that to me is the leading edge. Like, that is the cutting edge of my experience, the avant-garde. Because if I already have an understanding of it and words for it, okay, that's great and wonderful too, but that's not new information. So I love looking at things at that level, because it opens up a whole new layer of reality. And you do begin to see that what we engage with as reality is just a skin laid on top of this very real geometric construct that we exist within. And so that to me is like, wow, if it's just a layer of something, then I can change that layer, right? So it does open up, and we're talking about intention and coding, and all of that is somehow connected and weaves itself together because it's the same experience, whether I'm creating digitally or on pen and paper or in the sense of a life, it's the exact same mechanism. And that's what blows my mind.
Yes.
Is it's all the same. It's all these basic 7 principles or whatever.
Yeah. And then that the foundation of that is the geometry. And I love that you said it's not something that is new out there. It's like, it's an understanding that, no, that's it. It's like the void. And then there's geometry.
Yeah, totally. And then that is what changes things, right? It's not the information that changes me. It's my relationship with that information. When I let that information be something that's alive and vital, and I give it the room to be this transformative thing, you know what I mean? Like, that really can change your reality. It can totally change everything. Just this interface with these symbols that are in everything. It
And
does something.
what I have noticed is it does something to time.
Mm.
So it's almost like the way I would describe it is time bubbles, that there's, once you see it, time becomes more malleable, or at least at the experience of it. And it's, you can create a little bit more, or you can, it's a very interesting, and I haven't quite figured out why that is or where that all fits together, but I have noticed that phenomenon in my life since I started working with this.
I have the same thing. I have the same thing with time being very elastic, and it can be expanded or contracted really, really easily. And you said something that was really fascinating. And you said time, and you said, or at least my experience of it. Time is nothing but an experience.
Yes.
Because without the experience, I mean, it doesn't exist, right? So we know the only time I'm experiencing is my projection of it. So if I am the one creating the experience of time within my reality, then it must also be true that I am the one that can bend the experience of time within my reality. And I do that all of the time. I actually do this thing with my guides where I say, okay, we're bending time. Like this morning I did it. I had a very small amount of time to do like my morning routine work, my practice, then water all the flowers, then do my live stream, and then come to you. I got all of that done in like an hour and a half, which is astounding because normally it would take me 2 to 3 hours. But I said this morning, okay, team, I need to bend time because I have all the stuff I want to get done before I sit down with Angela at 10, done. And it just happens. But you have to leave it alone. You can't check your clock. It's like the intention. You can't second guess it. You have to trust that time is being bent.
I did that too as well on my walk today. I was like, okay, well, I've been feeling like I've been having that phenomenon. I want to get a little bit more. I was just enjoying myself so much. I'm like, I want to get a little bit more in before I have to go back. And you're right. As long as you're not checking on it, you absolutely can do it.
Yeah. Because you can take that moment and just expand it and stretch it and stretch it and stretch it. And so you are sort of suspended, but moving through the suspended reality. It's so fascinating.
It is fascinating.
It really is.
And would you attribute that to I know you kind of alluded to that, but would you attribute that all to your work with the sacred geometry, or was that a piece of it?
The time thing was something I had been playing with before that, but what the sacred geometry did was it gave not only my energy field a framework to understand more deeply, the thing that it did was it unlocked the mind's resistance. It gave the mind something logical, rational, actual to adhere itself to. And once the mind had accepted those geometric shapes, once it's like, talking about the virus, that's the virus. Once it's in the system, once truth is in the system, it changes everything. So what it did was it just lowered that firewall of the conscious mind, the disbeliever, the skeptic, the one that's like, I don't know if that's real. Because I'm one of the biggest skeptics on the planet. And I love that. I think skepticism keeps us healthy. But what seeing the geometry did, and then the ensuing actual physical experiences I was having while drawing it, I think because it was new to me, it wasn't like I was on board and the mind was still resistant. Like all of me was astounded. All of me was like, what, how does this work? This is actually real. So it's kind of like all of me discovered it at the same time. So it was a rare occurrence of the mind not really having much resistance because it was caught off guard as well. But those shapes, they do something to your system. They unlock something.
They do. And
They
that's
do.
what you were talking about earlier, but being able to heal or do work in non-local space, right? So I've been creating these meditations and then you just watch it. And it's not about, you can set the intention and just let it go, knowing that it's going to happen. But I always have this instruction, just receive. Like it's not about mentally figuring it out. It's something about watching those shapes. Like you said, it just interacts with you and your field and your body, and you don't need to get really like, oh, this is why it's happening, it's interacting with this, blah blah blah. It's just something that it's on such a deep level, that it's doing what it needs to do.
Yeah. And I think as you're sharing, what it reminds me of, or what it makes me think of is, sigils and sigil work. And I'm not sure if you've ever worked with sigils, but it's the same idea that it's just a symbolic representation of something that is created or that you want to be created. And the universe speaks in symbols. It doesn't speak in words. Yes. It speaks in vibration and frequency and symbology. So those symbols carry energy, they carry information. And actually, we could nerd out for days on this topic, man. We could do like a marathon episode, because now I'm thinking of Seth Speaks, and the part of Seth that book that I'm currently reading, he's talking about symbols, and he's talking about how there are actually symbols that are sort of like forbidden in certain parts of reality because of how powerful they are. And there are symbols that are only used in very, very specific circumstances because of their power to create or destroy. And so there is so much that we don't even understand about symbolism and how geometric shapes inform and influence and create our realities. We don't even know it, but companies know it. I mean, look at the symbology that's hidden in so many things. The FedEx arrow is a perfect example of that. It was 2 years ago that around that time that, I read this article that pointed that out. And I was like, oh my God, there's been an arrow in this logo the whole time. And I didn't even know it.
But somewhere you know it.
Somewhere I knew it, right? So it speaks to the subconscious. It speaks to the part of us that is always creating. And the poor rational logical mind, it thinks it's the one that is doing. It thinks no, you're a calculator, sweetie. You're just adding and subtracting. That's all you're doing. It's that subconscious layer that is the force, that is the driver. And so I think that for me, it was the understanding that this is speaking to a level of myself that doesn't require my participation.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. And that's what blows my mind. Or blew my mind, that there is this layer of self that is always operating and creating, whether we are aware or on board or part of the party or not.
So
amazing to me.
It is amazing. And you said something there that is something I've been thinking about how some symbols are forbidden. So in creating these sacred geometries, I've been wondering, is there, I don't know that the word's ethical that I want to use, but is there considerations for the reverence of these symbols and me just throwing them up on YouTube?
Yeah.
So, maybe this is something you thought of or you haven't, but what would, off the top of your head, what do you think about that? Or do you think we're ready to have experiences?
I think we're ready to have them because we're talking about them. And what I have come to know is by the time the conscious mind is aware of it and discussing it, it's already in process, right? It's like childbirth. Once the body and the mind is going, oh, that was a contraction, it's already been coming, right? I mean, this is a mother. It's not like just one day, it just happens, right? There's a buildup. This is a process. Yeah. So I think that to me, it brings us back to intention. And I think the intention is 99.999% of it. And I think that in hands that are compassionate and well-intended and mean to support or serve in a very real way, then I think that is, to me, that is enough. Now, certainly once you know how to do it better, to continue to do it in the way that isn't correct, that's a different story, right? It's when you know better, you do better. So ignorance only gets you off the hook the first time. But I think, from my perspective and what you have shared, your willingness, your reverence, your enthusiasm, your excitement, and the whole point that you are, I'm assuming the whole point or the destination was to discover or enter some sort of new way to serve, right? If it's a 5-minute video on YouTube and you just watch this and receive and it pieces you out or relaxes or whatever, or maybe it's more meaningful and this will work with, I don't know, nervous system stuff, blah, blah, blah. I think it's the intention. I really do. Okay. I think it's the intention. And you have respect for this. You understand what is possible when we're engaging with these things. And you also understand the reality that we live in a creative universe. So everything creates on some level, even if it's just a brief thought that creates something somewhere. So no, I think reverence and respect are important. And I think also intention.
Those are my thoughts as well.
Because if we think about the, a mystery school, several thousand years ago, I know there were a whole bunch of Egyptians slaughtering sacred geometry studies that, like the first year, and they're like, burr, burr, and they're like, that's not any shape of anything. That shape does not exist. You know what I mean? So I know throughout the history of humanity, and even those ascended masters who walk the planet, I bet Jesus couldn't draw a perfect triangle every single time.
Honestly, that's why I love the program, because as you were describing, trying to do things by hand, and then, a small error becomes a huge error as you move. And so I love this, that I don't have to measure. And it just came to me. I've always wanted to create them. And I was like, I wonder if there's software out there. And so I just put, sacred geometry animations, and all of a sudden this popped up. And then I started playing with it. I was like, I'm like several hours a day, I'm just nerding out doing that. So
I love that. I would be in the same place.
So do you want to talk a little bit about the energies that are happening right now? Because yesterday I'm driving home and there is the biggest moon I've seen in the longest, in forever. And it was just woo, like you could just
massive one.
Yes, you could just feel it was like calling me, like woo, And so what's going on with all of this? What's happening?
We are at a crossroads, humanity. We've been at a crossroads. That's what this whole year has been, we're at a decision point. People are being given a very protracted time to decide on the soul level. And, of course, that entails a human choice as well at some point. But the soul chooses first. And we're just at this point where the way that I see it, and, I can share how it's showing up in my own experience, is it's kind of what we were talking about. Do you believe that you can have the life that you want? Do you believe that you are the one who created what you have and in turn can create what you want if what you have isn't what you want? At some point, we have to decide. We have to decide, who is it that I align and ally and am allegiant to? Is it my own sense of truth and self? Am I the one really driving the bus or not? And I know what my answer is. But everyone is being given the opportunity to remember, to reclaim, to recall, to reascend to their own throne of sovereignty, to reactivate their divine authority, to unplug from the old reality. The way that I see it, and I can just make this statement, the 3D world is dead. It is collapsed. It has been for some time. It has been maintained as a holographic reality for those who aren't entirely sure or aren't ready yet or haven't decided. But you no longer have to participate in that world. We no longer have to be a part of that world if we choose not to. The key is you have to believe it, and you have to have done your work to allow yourself to arrive at that belief and for it to be supported, right? Because, we can talk about belief all day long, but you and I both know just because I put a picture of a boat on my vision board doesn't mean it's going to happen. If I don't believe I'm worth a boat, I'm never going to get the fucking boat. So it is all about the internal experience right now. And if you're not paying attention, if you're not listening, if you're not, exploring and curious about what's going on inside, that's a choice. That's a choice. And I think what it does is it keeps you removed from the truth of who you are. So what I see is one of two things. Either people are moving away from their truth and their sense of self at lightning speed. They cannot offload their personal authority fast enough. Or you are barreling towards that truth at 3,000 miles an hour, dead on perpendicular. You're not going to hit that wall. What you're going to do is you're going to pop through. And we kind of talked about this in our first attempt to record this about the third way and the third path. And what I've been saying lately is 1 and 1 equals 3. When you accept you are not good, you are not bad, you are both. You are not masculine, you are not feminine, you are both. You are not right, you are not wrong, you are both. You are not the villain, you are not the hero, you are both, and have been and will continue to be. That is what opens up the third way. Because the third dimension is you're either good or bad. Those are your choices in the third dimension. We are so far beyond that. We are so far beyond this categorization and separation of people into only this bicameral approach to life. That's just not how it is. So where we are energetically is if you're choosing to return to yourself, you are accelerating home at breakneck speed. If you are choosing to leave yourself, you are being pushed away at breakneck speed. Where we are right now is you will get exactly what you choose. And consider that statement, because you will get it. Our free will right now is on frickin' steroids.
Make sure the code we're writing is not disturbed or disrupted.
And that you believe it with every fiber of your being before you hit enter. And then the minute you hit enter and you go, yep, that's what I wanted. It popped up on the screen. Exit, shut it down, shut it off, and never look at it again. Just trust. You have to decide. And not deciding is a decision.
I love that you brought that up about doubt at the beginning, because I'm still like, there's still part of my brain that's like working through that, because exactly right. What you're saying is it's the same thing like we were talking about with time. As soon as you doubt that time is malleable and you're, checking, then that doesn't work. And so that same principle is at play now.
I mean, really the question is, do you live within time or does time live within you? And if you believe that you live within time, you're fucked. And you're bound by linear time. Because you don't call the shots. When you are giving this is the thing people don't understand. When you give your authority to a concept, to an idea, to a person who tells you about concepts and ideas, you live within their reality. When you say, no, actually, I don't believe that's true. And when I live my life according to what I know is true, my life is evidence that that is not true. That's the place we should be in. And that doubt is not a bad thing. Here's the other thing is I think we become so paranoid. It's like, the Abraham Hicks thing. And everyone interpreted that to mean don't ever have a bad thought, right? You know what I mean? Like, oh my God, I had a bad thought. I'm going to die today. No, you're not. You're not. So it's not to exclude or deny these doubts or these fears. It is to pull them close. And this is the key. If you deny and try to push away and avoid those fears, you have just done the same thing. You now live within the world that fear created. But when you say, no, baby, come here, I know you're afraid and it's okay that you're afraid. We're going to talk about that, and you pull it close. Now it lives within you. So you are still the one creating the reality, and you just have a moment of contending with a part of you that isn't quite on board yet, but you'll get there. Mm-hmm. So when it's the things that we don't pay attention to, it's the things that we're trying to avoid or bypass, those are the things that are going to bite you in the ass and bring it all crumbling down. So where we are is you get to decide what your world is built by.
Yes.
So who is it?
Yes, that idea of choice is so important. And
we see this happening all over the planet, that those who have been historically in power and are no longer, they're essentially just a puppet, a straw man, straw person. They want you to believe that there's only an either or choice. And when you pay attention to the matrix and what it's spewing at you, you see what's going on. because form and function are inherently linked, and form always follows function. So when you see people screaming, you have to decide. You have to be right or wrong. And when you see people screaming and pointing their finger over there at those people who are wrong and bad, that very clearly illustrates that they don't have the grip on it anymore. And the only way they can keep us under their control is to make us believe that it's an either or choice. But if you sit back and go, no, actually, I think there's a third way, because I've been good and I've been bad. I've been happy, sad, masculine, feminine, good and evil. So I'm just going to chill out and wait and see. And when you allow yourself to be all of it, that's when the third way opens.
Mm-hmm. I love what you said too about, and Caroline Myss would talk about this, about when you identify at the story level, like at the population story level, and another way to say that is when you identify with a group, you have to heal at the rate of that group or that idea or that concept as it evolves. But soon as you take that and you make, like you said, bring it toward the self, make it internal and decide, is this my truth? Or am I adopting this truth? In which case, then now I'm intimately and energetically entangled with that. And now I have to, I will heal, or I will deal with that at the speed at which the collective does. Yeah. And I think that, and to me, to see how we went from like red, blue, how just like the last 4 years with Trump, like just how tremendously polarizing that was, to now just, okay, well, things got a little bit easier there. Well, how can we still continue to create separation? Well, how about vaccinated, unvaccinated? Like, to see how willing people are to stay connected to those group identities seems crazy to me. It's like it's like I said, like you said, coming back to choice. And is that the matrix I want to be entangled with?
Yeah, because you're only a projection of what you think you are. And when you change what you think you are, that projection has no choice but to shift. And that's what we see all the time in spiritual awakenings and spiritual journeys. I mean, I'm sure everyone listening, I've had these experiences of losing friends or families, or suddenly there's conflict because you perceive yourself now in a new way. And so you may not be saying or doing it, but just how you show up now is different. So you're suddenly a new cast member in a sitcom that's been running your whole life, but this is new Chandler. Who are you? You know what I mean? It's like on Roseanne, when Becky or whatever, the older daughter, suddenly with the new actress, it's like, I don't know, who's new Becky? You know what I mean? But new Becky shows up and everyone else is like, this isn't Becky. What the hell? But you're like, no, I'm Becky. Because I was thinking about this the other day. What if everyone in your life sees a different version of you than you see of yourself? And even if they're looking at pictures, like let's say you and I had a friend named Bob, and who you think Bob is and who I think Bob is are completely different. And you and I would even look at a picture of Bob and go, yeah, that's Bob. But you have no idea of knowing what I'm seeing. I might be seeing an entirely different version of Bob than you are physically seeing. And if we were to put them next to each other, they might look like two actually totally different people, but you will never know because you can't see what I see and you don't see how I see. So in that sense, who people perceive Angela to be is only a projection. So when you decide that you're not going to let the world that you are projecting yourself into tell you what is true, and you arrive at that truth first, and then you project yourself into that reality. Now you are a reality disruptor. Now you are creating in real time all of the time. Our fields are always creating, they're creation engines. And when you don't have that doubt, when you don't have the fear, when you've released this insecurity and you know, and you operate, and that knowing is your operating system, you don't have to do anything to manifest. It just shows up. The red carpet literally unrolls for you. The seas part, and you never have an experience of anything else. And people over there are going, how the hell is he doing that? I don't understand, because I know what I am. And I allow myself to operate at that level. And I don't need to be a part of a group to be successful or to thrive. And I see now why I was never on the inside as a child, because it prepared me for this moment in life where I'm like, I don't care if I'm the only one in the room. I'm having a ball. Whether it's me or 1,000 people, I don't care. I don't require a group to know myself. So in that mindset, and you said it so perfectly, And I love that. I'd never heard that about when you identify with a group, you heal at the rate that the group heals. And I'm assuming you evolve at the rate that the group evolves. That's an option. You can heal at your own damn rate. You can evolve at your own rate, but you have to listen to your own rhythms and cycles. That's really where we are. Are you letting these rhythm and cycles be your reality, or is it this rhythm and cycle that's your reality? And when you tap into this, and I've been having amazing, amazing experiences of that, and talk about stretching time. Yesterday, I just out of nowhere got the blurb to, or just got the nudge to do my September events. And I'd been thinking about it, and I was like, I got to start, my intention was to start booking my events much further in advance than I had been, so people had time to sign up. And it usually takes me about a couple of hours to do an event listing. Yesterday, out of nowhere, I was like, oh, I'm just going to sit down and play with the thumbnail for the event listings. I just want to see what I can come up with. I'm not kidding you. An hour and a half later, I had both events written, the thumbnails done, everything was up online on my site, sent out, done. It was complete in half the time because I listened to that inner emanation that was, hey, what about this? It wasn't me going, oh, well, the to-do list says I have to do this, or Angela is doing this, so that means I have to do it so I can keep up with her. I was not at all in any way informed or driven by the external reality. So the point of this is to say, when you let this be the driving force, it's amazing what will happen. It blows my mind daily. What happens when I just listen to this?
And the doubt thing, the trust thing comes back there too. When you're talking about waiting until the time, like it makes so much sense. And I've had that experience. It's like, why can't I get those emails sent? And then one morning I wake up and it's as easy as, like brushing my hair is like something, it's just, oh, wow, that just came out of nowhere. And it just was the perfect time. But again, there's a certain level of trust in yourself and trust in divine timing and all of that, that's just going to happen when it needs to happen. And if it doesn't feel right, if it's this really kind of laborious, like, oh, I have to get this stuff done, then maybe that's not the moment.
Yeah. And that's where the choice lies too, is do you want the process of creating something to be that teeth pulling, dragging your feet struggle, then push through that resistance? Or get up and say, you know what, I'm going to come back to this when it feels easier, when it feels lighter. And I promise you it will. You just have to be willing to follow those instincts, and has nothing to do with what you think. It's this emanation that says, hey, what if you do that? You go, oh, let me just try and see. Before you know it, it's done. Sorry, I'm a little bit distracted by your microphone and my head. It looks like I have a little black beanie on because my head is like right there.
I'm on the bottom in this. Okay.
It's like whack-a-mole on my head. So yeah, I just, you have to, at what point are you just going to decide that what's best for yourself, right? At what point are you just going to start to be curious about that voice?
Yes.
So
do you have time for one more thing that I wanted to bring up?
I have so much time.
Okay. So in your last video, you talked a lot about using your emotions and paying attention, and that it's really like getting in sort of, I don't know if I'm using this or saying this correctly, but using sort of your emotions as a portal, like to getting what you need. And I thought, in some ways I completely understand that, but where I was getting caught up is, the stories that we tell are stories that are just entangled with emotion. Yeah. So how do we, what if our story is clouding those emotions? Like, how do we use our emotions in one regard? And I think I totally agree with what you're saying, but I also have had the experience recently of somebody like, just, I know this is truth because I feel it. And yet I think everybody, the consensus around him would be that, that story is not correct.
Right.
You're writing off a bad piece of, you're running off a bad piece of code.
Right. Well, I think that is something you just figure out as you go. I think that is something, and, kind of bringing us back to that idea of it's about your own internal rhythms and knowings and cycles. And that's what brings the magic to the surface and to the front, because some for some people, given the area that they're creating in or working with, they may not have triggers around certain things, right? So let's just use money as an example. Maybe I don't have a lot of stories around money. Maybe money was never an issue. Maybe money was always just easy and free for me. And so when it comes to manifesting money or using money or creating money, I have no resistance. I have no stickiness. And so it's effortless for me just to be in that constant flow. Oops, just knocked my laptop. In that constant flow of like in and out. And it's just a constant turnover. You might have a ton of issues with money. You might have so much baggage and emotional story wound up. That flow is still available to you. I don't have access to anything you don't have access to. It's just that I don't have stickiness around money. So it's easier for me to just allow it to move through my experience. And it's easier for me to receive it because I have nothing within me telling me I can't have it, I don't deserve it, or it's the root of all evil. That's sort of a simple version of it. But I think that what I find is, again, it's about the intention. You're going to get confused. You're going to be unclear. You're going to say some things that probably a day or two later, you're going to go, oh, that was not at all what I wanted. And now I see why. So I think the key is to not be afraid of making a mistake, not be afraid of doing it wrong, and also know that it's not like you only get one shot at creating and then it's done. And sorry, Angela, you said this, so that's what you get until you die. You have to wait until you come back in a new life to have it differently. So there's always that eternal restart button, but using emotion consciously and deliberately is exactly that. You just have to be willing to go into the emotional field and not be afraid of it. You have to be willing to let yourself be scared, let yourself be angry or sad or whatever, and just witness it. You can just watch it and see. When you allow yourself to see that emotions are a tool, emotions are a language, but they're not anything that's in control of you. They're not anything that you don't have any authority over or any influence on. And if there is something that every single time you see or hear or experience it and you're triggered to an emotional state, that points you directly in the direction of some work that is asking for your attention. Yes. But I think that we all have our issues, we all have our stuff, but underneath all of that is how you feel about it is what creates the experience. How it's like a horror movie. You can take 100 people to a horror movie and some people are going to have the time of their life. Some people aren't going to sleep for months. We all saw the same movie. It's just that internally there were some different things that informed your experience. So yeah, and I shared this in that video, was that, the feeling is the portal to what you want to experience. And what I mean by that is, if thinking about it is an exercise in misery, I bet you doing it isn't going to be much better. So if we are allowing our emotions to kind of tell us like, this might be what you're in store for, whether that's apt or not, at least it gives me insight into what's happening inside. An example would be, for years, this was 2016, 2017, and I had connected with some spiritual folks who were colleagues. And I thought that we were, becoming friends. And I thought that there was like a friendship here. Well, long story short, ended up kind of breaking ties with them. For years, I took it personally. For years, I thought it was something that I did. For years, I was angry, I was resentful, and I had this unresolved issue with these people. And every time I would see them on YouTube, or I was on social media at the time, or Facebook, and I'd be like, fuck, and I was just so angry. And then finally I dealt with it. And I asked my team, like, please show me what really happened. It had nothing to do with me. It was not personal. It was just circumstances and the way things happened. And now in hindsight, when I look back and see what those people are doing now, I'm like, whew, I dodged a bullet there because I don't want any part of that. My point here is, it's only ever what we have active inside of us that is creating our experience of anything. So if you are bumping up against something consistently and it's crippling you or debilitating you emotionally, it's not because you're necessarily doing the wrong thing, maybe, but the first thing I would do was just be curious about those emotions. Like, what is this, baby? What's going on? And just get some language, get some words, get some purchase there. But yeah, I do believe, and this is the other thing. We humans have been programmed to believe that we always need to be in some emotionally heightened state. You're not joyful, you're not feeling life, you're not sad, and then you're not, you're avoiding your stuff. Like, we have been taught that it is like our human requirement that I always have to be in some sort of heightened emotional state. No, you don't. No, you don't. I believe that our innate state of being is neutrality. I believe unconditional love is a neutral state of being. It's the superposition. Potential can only exist when I have no thoughts or beliefs about something. Because the minute that I decide what something is, then every other possibility and potential collapses. So stay in a neutral, suspended state until you decide, until you know what you want. And if you're trying to stay neutral, but you keep getting pulled in some direction, that I think is a key, that there's something sticky inside of you is trying. Did I answer your question, or did I just talk around it?
No, you did. You did. I mean, I think you and I both agree that emotions are signals to us. They certainly are very good signals. Like you said, ones that repetitive ones that happen over and over again, ones that are, you know, out of proportion to maybe the situation. Those are really good sign that there's healing. There's some, hey, pay attention to me. We gotta get in there and look at that stuff. I think maybe my question, what you, because you did say feeling is the connection point to the reality you want to experience. And I think my question was, what happens when your story gets in the way? And so the story becomes too entangled with the feeling that you can't trust the feelings. But I think if I hear you correctly, what you're saying is that, that you can be in your, you can project the feeling that you want for the experience that you're, so there's sort of two different things, I think.
Well, and I think it's also, when you were talking about the story being in the way, story to me is solely the realm of the mind. The heart doesn't hold stories. And so when there's a story in the way, it's because you're trying to think your way through a feeling thing.
Okay,
so
that's very clarifying.
drop into the heart and tell the mind, like, look, honey, I get you're confused. I get you're afraid, and this doesn't make sense. I don't really understand it either, but let's feel it together and see what we come up with. And then just let yourself, because I've actually been doing this practice, and I'll share this. And this is not something that I consciously did. It just started happening, where every single morning, almost without fail, right as I'm coming out of sleep, I will find myself in a memory of an old period or an old experience in my life. And oftentimes they're really, really highly emotionally charged. And what I have found is the key to releasing them is simply to watch it like I'm in a movie. Don't get rehooked, don't get reattached. Certainly don't avoid either, and just go, oh, whoa, okay, I feel the anger rising. Oh, I felt that little knot in the pit of the stomach. Okay, now I feel some emotional shifts happening, and you just watch it. And you get to watch the entirety of the arc, the bell curve from, catalyzation to completion, and then it's done. And I didn't have an emotional response to it, so I didn't reactivate that reality. I just got to watch it. And to every part of the system, when I am non-responsive in a very actual way, I'm not suppressing something, I'm really open, I just no longer have an emotional attachment to it. That's when it can go and collapse, because there's nothing within me that's grabbing onto it and going, wait, I still need that. Mm-hmm. So I think that if people find themselves in story, and when people find themselves caught up in this, consider just kind of going back to the heart and just dropping in and dropping out of the mind, and just, again, pulling your little overthinker close and saying, hey, just give me 15 minutes. I'm just going to sit here and breathe for 15 minutes and we'll see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In Buddhism, they teach you the difference between emotion and sensation. Sensation is just the feeling, and emotion is feeling with story.
Right.
And so there's a difference between, and that's part of the practice of is teaching you to recognize the difference, to pull those two things apart. So you get to have the experience in the emotional body, and then you get to see what the mental body was up to. And right. Yeah. So, well, I think we should call it here, but I think we had some good conversations. I'm so glad that you came on again.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me again. And I'm so happy we did not have to contend with my glitch parade computer like we tried to last week, which, I have this new theory of like dog years, like Zoom years, like 30 seconds of glitching on Zoom is like 3 weeks of glitching in the real world. Like it just feels like an eternity, those 30 seconds. So I'm super stoked to be back with you chatting, and I'm happy we got to do it free from interruption.
Yeah, we'll have to do it again whenever we hear the call.
Whenever you need me, just let me know.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you. All
Thank
right.
you.
We will be back after this ridiculously short break.